All right, welcome back to another episode of the Always Adaptive podcast. I am your host, Randall James. This is episode 8, and I'm on my way to episode 10. I've been churning these out, and I've shown no signs of slowing down. So hoping to be there soon and keep the momentum going. Real quick before I get into today's topics, I hope you'll follow me on all social media at Always Adaptive on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Threads. So I have a few things I want to talk about today. A couple of studies and just a couple of topics to rant on a little bit. But the first study I want to talk about is an intermittent fasting study from June of 2021. And this was a very unique study because not only did it look at calorie restrictions effects on weight loss for comparing, just calorie restriction versus fasting, alternate day fasting groups, but it also looked at markers of autophagy. And that's very important. I'll get into why in a little bit. I also want to talk about a WTOP news story that it's entitled to avoid premature death. Fitness is more important than losing weight. So this kind of goes into the healthy at any size movement, which if you've been following me for any amount of time, you know that movement kind of bugs me a little bit. So we're going to dive into that and get into why that might not be exactly, why they might just be kind of working their way around the truth there a little bit. I want to give my thoughts on AI fitness trends, because someone had asked me what I thought about apps, and, they're starting to become these workout apps where they show you different workout routines and exercise and such. So I'll give you my thoughts on that. And then I just want to get into like a little bit of a gym etiquette rant about just proper gym etiquette. Even though I don't go to the gym very often, when I do, I see a lot of crazy stuff, and I saw something that really irked me. So I wanted to get into that. But anyways, like I said, I hope you'll follow me. And also on the podcast front, I release a podcast every Tuesday, and on YouTube, I do release bonus segments. So anywhere from 1 to 2 bonus segments each week. And I'm also releasing shorts the whole time over there. So I think the first 30 days, I released 50 videos over on YouTube. So I hope you'll go there and give me a subscribe and like the video if you like the video. But anyways, on to the first story. So randomized control trial to isolate the effects of fasting and energy restriction on weight loss and metabolic health in lean adults. Science Translational Medicine. So this is very important because, first of all, let me just say that I am a proponent of intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating. I think I actually just made a video on like what were the steps that I would take if I had to start over in 2025, because I used to weigh 80 pounds. So like if I gained 80 pounds and I had to start that whole process over again, what were some of the steps that I would take? And one of the first ones that I would do is that I would practice intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating. And I think because I already did that, I practiced that for about 8 years and I had a lot of really good success on it. And so I'm definitely in its corner. However, with the rise in popularity of intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating comes the people that sort of pretend that it's some sort of magic thing. It's doing all of the things that it's doing regardless of energy restriction. Just in a nutshell, before we get into all that, energy restriction, in order for you to lose weight, you need to restrict the amount of energy coming into the system, or you need to burn more calories than you're consuming. That's the easiest way to think of it. If you don't, then you will store, you will gain, you will add tissue to your frame. The only way to lose tissue is to burn more calories than you're consuming. And so it's long been thought that regardless of energy restriction, you could intermittent fast or time restricted or practice time restricted eating, eat in a caloric surplus or at maintenance and still lose weight. And, there's been those of us that have been sort of saying, well, hold on a second, because at this point, there's been study after study after study that's shown that when you compare maintenance calories and you have groups that are fasting versus not fasting, the fat loss is no different. It's all the same. And so what typically ends up happening is that you'll have the fasting camp or the time restricted eating camp will say, oh, well, it's really autophagy. That's the big important denominator there. Where if you're not familiar with what autophagy is like a cellular cleanup and recycling mechanism where, right now you have waste and dead cells floating all over your body, on your skin, all up inside of your guts. It's flipping gross inside of your body right now. And without autophagy, which by the way, autophagy happens just with calorie restriction. Okay. So you don't need fasting in order for that process to occur. But so when you have autophagy occurring, you have proteins and other cells going around and cleaning that stuff up, gobbling it up, becoming supercharged cells, converting the tissues and the resources to various different processes, essentially just making you a healthier you, getting rid of the clutter and the debris to make sure all systems are running smoothly. And so for the longest time, it was said that, okay, yeah, the fat loss is the same, but autophagy is better with fasting groups. And hey, I've certainly been guilty of saying that myself. I 100% have said that. And so this is actually something I've changed my mind on as time has passed. Like I said, it's been 8 years. And so this study, I think, is the first of its kind that I know of that actually looked at markers of autophagy. Now, there are a lot of markers of autophagy, and this one only looked at 2. So who knows? It could come out later that there are other markers of autophagy that are more affected by time-restricted eating. We'll see. But it's not typically when I'm looking at this stuff, I'm like, okay, as time goes on, are we getting more confident or less confident of a specific thing? And it seems like as time goes on and as we get more and more data, we're getting less confident that intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating are anything special. We're getting more confident that it really is just the caloric restriction part of time-restricted eating that is the most important thing of it all. It's sort of the crux of it. So real quick, study design, 36 lean, healthy participants were divided into 3 groups for 3 weeks. And the groups either followed daily energy restriction, which is classified as 75% of their maintenance calories. So that means if they were eating 2,000 calories, if their maintenance was 2,000 calories, they're eating 1,500 calories, okay? The second group was an alternate day fasting group with energy restriction, so 24-hour fast. And then on the day that they weren't fasting, the day that they were eating, they're eating 150% of maintenance calories. And so that's sort of designed to mimic the daily energy restriction, the 75 each day. If you take 2 days at 150% of maintenance calories, that equates to 75% each day. And so what that's looking to do is essentially like, hey, these people are fasting and they're restricting their calories. Which is it, the daily energy restriction, or is it the fasting that's having the biggest impact? And then they also did alternate day fasting as a third group with no energy restriction. So very similar to the second group, it was 0 calories on the fasting day, 200% of maintenance calories on the feeding day. And so, well, here's the weight loss results. Daily energy restriction, 75% of maintenance calories, led to significant weight loss of 1.9 kgs or 4.21 pounds, with most of that coming from fat loss. 3.86 pounds of that came from fat. That's huge. 4.21 pounds of weight loss, 3.86 pounds of that from fat. That's most of it. And then we have the alternate day fasting with energy restriction. And that was, again, not eating anything on one day and then eating 150% of their calories on another day. And that caused weight loss, 3.53 pounds of weight loss, but with less fat loss. Now get this, only 1.63 pounds of that 3.53 pounds was from fat. So that means that almost 2 pounds of the weight that they lost was from lean tissue. Now, I'll throw a caveat in there. When we fast, one of the things that ends up happening is that we do become dehydrated. Lack of carbohydrate coming into the system, lack of electrolytes coming into the system makes it more difficult for us to hold on to water. So it could be possible that some of the weight that they lost was actually from water. Very possible. I don't know. But the fact remains that even if it was, then that means all around they lost less weight than just the daily energy restriction group. And that's very important. And then the alternate day fasting without energy restriction, so 0 calories on one day and then 200% of maintenance calories on another day, had minimal weight loss, 1.15 pounds. That might sound like a lot, but over 3 weeks, that's not a lot. That's nothing, you know. And then negligible fat loss. So clearly the daily energy restriction group was more effective for weight loss and more effective for most of that weight coming from fat. Other things that they checked were post-meal metabolism, gut hormones, gene expression in fat tissue, and none of that was significantly different. The big thing here, though, so restricting energy intake via alternate day fasting, so 0 on one day and then 150% maintenance, resulted in a compensatory reduction in physical activity thermogenesis, primarily due to reduced spontaneous light and moderate intensity movements, whereas no such reduction in calories in activity were apparent during daily energy restriction or alternate day fasting without energy restriction. So this is very important because what this is talking about is there's something called NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And essentially what that is how much you fidget when you're just kind of standing around or sitting around watching a movie. I'm sure you know people that just cannot sit still for the life of them, constantly shifting their weight around. They're constantly tapping and moving their leg and just doing all kinds of stuff, getting up, sitting back down. And then there's people that actually sit really, really still. So the person that moves a lot, they burn a lot more calories on average than the person that sits still. And I mean, there are some estimates that it's as high as almost 1,000 calories per day more than the person that sits still. And so what this is talking about is your body has a compensatory effect where when you stop eating, your body will slow things down to conserve energy because it knows. I mean, it doesn't, your body knows if you're in a situation that you're going to be starving for a while, it doesn't want to waste energy because who knows when the next meal could be coming in. And so subconsciously, it slows you down. You'll do less fidgeting. You'll have, you'll talk less, you'll get up less. And those things all make a really dramatic difference on the amount of calories burned. So it probably does, in fact, account for why the daily energy restriction group had such better results than the alternate day fasting group. That's something to take into account. Now, autophagy. Now, this was the big one. Now, they measured two different things. They measured SIRT1 gene and they measured insulin-like growth factor. Insulin-like growth factor was slightly upregulated in the daily energy restriction group and was slightly downregulated in the fasting group, but it was not statistically significant. They were very, very close to each other. The big thing is that SIRT1 was similar in all groups. And so when SIRT1 gene is upregulated, it's a primary marker for autophagy because what it is responsible for is sort of activating proteins around the body to participate in that autophagy process. Without SIRT1 gene, the process, it will be very hard for it to start in a nutshell. So you have acetylated proteins all over your body, and that acetyl group is essentially shutting down those proteins. It's stopping them from participating in autophagy. And what SIRT1 does is it cleaves that off. It gets rid of it. It's called deacetylation. And so when you deacetylate these proteins, now they're activated. Now they're free to do all kinds of different processes, but now they're actually participating in that autophagy process. And this is important because people will say, oh, well, autophagy is upregulated more during time-restricted eating. Sure, but it's also upregulated more during calorie restriction in the first place. So is it that it's upregulated more during fasting because fasting is magic? Or is it upregulated more during fasting because fasting puts you in a caloric deficit? And my answer is that it's the latter, clearly. And time again, things keep showing this. So again, we'll see if there's more studies out there that pop up that maybe they start to look at different markers of autophagy, because I think they should. Again, just it's important to open up lines of communication and talk about this type of stuff. The more people that talk about it, the more people that shine a light on these studies, the more awareness it is, the more scientists get a hold of it, and they start coming up with new creative study designs and looking at different new things. So hopefully scientists keep digging into this, and eventually we'll get a study where they look at all of the markers of autophagy. Probably won't ever be all, but if we can get more, I'm happy with that. So this was, I was really happy to see this study, but the conclusion here is that daily energy restriction is more effective than alternate day fasting for reducing body fat, period. And I've known that. Most people in the fitness community know that, but it's unfortunate that there's sort of this, there's this thing that happens where when people are new to health and fitness, they latch on to things like this. And again, that's not to say that fasting is bad. I'm a proponent of fasting. And I think I think it's a very useful tool in the very beginning when people first start learning how to restrict their calories. Fasting is a great tool for that. But unfortunately, when people first start a health and fitness journey, they are dogmatic about these certain topics: keto, carnivore, intermittent fasting, all these different things. And there's a saying, just because you know something doesn't mean you understand something. So you might hear something and there might be parts of that something that are true, but until you've done the digging and just sat and chewed on the topic for a long time, years, then you don't understand the different interactions between different foods, different proteins, different compounds, different, there's all these different things where it's not just one dimensional. Okay. So it's really important whenever you hear something, always do your own research, always preaching that, even with what I'm saying to you right now. Do your own research, look it up for yourself. But also don't get carried away on these fads, okay? And I know that a lot of these diets can make you feel good. And again, I'm guilty of saying this myself. Intermittent fasting, I felt great, right? When I did keto, I felt great. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. I was just talking to Les, my mentor, in another episode, a New Year's special released on the 24th, talking about how cortisol feels good. Cortisol is meant to activate you and get you out there in the world. But what do you keep hearing? Cortisol is bad. Cortisol is the stress hormone. So to have cortisol chronically activated is bad for your body. Well, guess what? When you're constantly fasting, cortisol is chronically activated. When you're constantly in ketosis and your body's relying on gluconeogenesis to turn amino acids to glucose, cortisol is constantly elevated. That's not good. So just because a process in the body is possible doesn't mean that it's efficient, doesn't mean that that's what your body is supposed to be doing. So those are my thoughts on that. Fasting study was really interesting, and I hope we get more data. So the next article I want to talk about is a WTOP news article entitled, To Avoid Premature Death, Fitness is More Important Than Losing Weight, New Research Finds. So again, we're back to the healthy at any size movement and the fat acceptance movement. And this sort of bugs me because the title should say fitness and losing weight are important. It's not saying that losing weight isn't important, but the way that they word this is to make you believe most people will walk away from this thinking that if they get fit, but they're still overweight, it's okay. And that's not the take home of this. And that's the frustrating thing about just the traditional news media, man. It's like they cannot help themselves but to just twist the words and try to get across their own biases or their own thoughts. And it's unfortunate because most people read the headlines. Most people don't read the studies. But hey, that's what you have me for, right? So this was based off of a study entitled Cardiorespiratory Fitness, Body Mass Index, and Mortality, a systematic review and meta-analysis. Now, first and foremost, I just want to say I'm not a big fan of systematic reviews because they can choose different criteria. They can choose inclusion and exclusion criteria, meaning what are the criteria that the studies need to meet in order to be included in the meta-analysis or excluded in the meta-analysis. And that's a big deal because scientists, obviously they have ethical guidelines and all this, blah, blah, blah. But we are human beings. All people have bias. I don't care what you say, even scientists, the best of the best scientists. And that's why it's really important if you're ever reading a study to go down and see who funded the study, because you never know. For example, my friend Alex, love Alex, chiropractor that was just on, he sent me a study. If you scroll down to the very bottom of the study, turns out he was a chiropractor. The chiropractor in the study helped to fund the study. Now that's important because that chiropractor can adjust his methods, get it, adjust, but change his methods. So let's say that someone has a very high intensity approach to chiropractic adjustments. Well, if they're doing a study and they're funding the study and that bias drips into the study, well, maybe they'll ease off of their intensity a little bit. Maybe they'll be extra gentle for this set of patients. And that's not something that, well, they might pick on it, but they'll pick up on it. But a lot of times they won't pick up on it. It's a subconscious thing. And so it's very important that when looking at studies, dig into, like if you see a meta-analysis, that's like a compilation of a bunch of different studies, dig into individual studies. Very important. And I honestly, this is just personal preference. I'm a big fan of just individual randomized controlled trials, human randomized controlled trials, because I can just see it. It's very crystal clear, But so anyways, so what they set out to do, they had a reference group of normal weight individuals that were declared fit. And by fit, they mean good cardiorespiratory fitness. And then the comparison groups were overweight fit, obese fit, normal weight unfit, overweight unfit, and obese unfit. Okay. So just one more time, you have your reference group, which is normal weight and fit by cardiorespiratory fitness standards. And then the comparison groups were overweight fit, obese fit, normal weight unfit, overweight unfit, and obese unfit. Now, when looking at the two outcomes that they measured were cardiovascular disease risk and all-cause mortality. So I'm going to go over all-cause mortality here first. And this is the one thing that I sort of have a little bit of an issue with. Now, hazard ratio, which is essentially like what is the percentage increase or decrease of risk? So when we look at overweight fit individuals had a hazard ratio of 0.96, meaning they had a 4% reduction in all-cause mortality. Just to say that one more time, overweight fit individuals, so they're overweight, but they're fit, good cardiorespiratory fitness, had a hazard ratio of 0.96, a 4% reduction in all-cause mortality, meaning overweight is protective. And then the obese fit individuals had a hazard ratio of 1.11, meaning they had an 11% increase in all-cause mortality. Now, both of these are not statistically significant. And this is what I don't like about these types of studies, because they do this statistical analysis and they can cherry pick all kinds of stuff. They can keep entering in different data sets until they get the number that they want. But essentially, without going too far down the rabbit hole, there's something called a p-value. And once that's set, if the confidence interval crosses 1 for this particular study, then it's declared not statistically significant, regardless of what the hazard ratio said. So even though obese fit individuals still had an 11% increase in all-cause mortality, they declared it not statistically significant. But now on to the unfit individuals. So you have normal weight unfit with hazard ratio of 1.92. That's huge. So that's a 92% increase in all-cause mortality. And then overweight unfit, which had a hazard ratio of 1.82, 82% increase in all-cause mortality. And then obese unfit with a hazard ratio of 2.04. So 200% increase, or 100% increase, sorry. Something to think about here is there is a protective effect of being overweight. Now, this goes into the whole, is BMI even a good marker? And is all-cause mortality even something good to measure? Because all-cause mortality, it's not just health markers. It's not just, heart disease risk, cancer, type 2 diabetes, all this stuff. All-cause mortality means all causes. So that means car accidents. That means murder. That means all kinds of different things. Like, let's take overweight, unfit individuals being lower than normal weight, unfit. Well, if someone that's overweight falls, it's thought that there's a protective effect there. If someone's like normal weight or even light and they fall, and it's a particularly bad fall, they're at a much greater risk of shattering their hip or some other sort of fracture. That's an important thing to take into account. I can't say for certain, but this is going to bring me to cardiovascular disease risk and why I think this is a more important statistic. So overweight fit. So again, they're going to declare these not statistically significant, which in my mind, these are still things that should raise red flags and people still need to pay attention to it, because again, it's about opening up the lines of communication, talking about it like, that's interesting. Even though it's not statistically significant, there was still a 50% increase in their risk of cardiovascular disease. Okay, so why don't we do another study and keep seeing, so hopefully this study was peer reviewed. Could not find if it was or not. But hopefully someone tries to replicate these results and maybe they find something different. That happens all the time. There's a replication crisis in psychology. There's actually been 2 different replication crises where a large amount of studies that are in the databases right now where people went to go replicate them, they could not be replicated. So it's very important, that replication process. Anyways, so overweight but fit individuals had a hazard ratio of 1.50, so meaning 50% increase in cardiovascular disease risk, but not statistically significant. Okay, whatever. Like, either way, 50% higher, that's a massive increase. And that goes against what the all-cause mortality group just said. Okay, now we move on to obese but fit. And again, remember, this is the reference group here is normal weight but fit. So the obese but fit group had a hazard ratio of 1.62, meaning 62% increase in cardiovascular risk, higher risk of cardiovascular risk, disease risk, sorry. So that's a linear increase going from overweight to obese. And it's a massive increase going from normal weight through those 2 different populations. Now let's move on to unfit groups. So we have normal weight but unfit, hazard ratio of 2.04. So 2 times higher risk of cardiovascular disease. Overweight but unfit, hazard ratio 2.58, meaning a 2.6 times higher risk of cardiovascular disease. And then the obese unfit, hazard ratio of 3.35, a 3.3 times higher risk of cardiovascular disease. So again, in a linear fashion, you're seeing their risk go up, regardless of whether being fit with good cardiovascular health is better than not. Either way, what this is saying is that being overweight comes with a massive increase in risk from cardiovascular disease. So again, this is why I don't think it's useful to just look at all-cause mortality. We have to look at the different, be very specific about the outcome that you're measuring. Because there are all kinds of confoundings when it comes to all-cause mortality. For example, people that are into health and fitness, they're going to do activities that are inherently more risky. For example, they are more likely going to go hike on a advanced hike that has 5,000 feet of elevation or 10,000 feet of elevation. They're more likely to go do those dangerous activities. People get injured and die on some of those activities. Getting hit by a car. Me, I'm a runner. So I spend a lot more time out in traffic with no protection than the average individual. So I would be declared a normal weight but fit individual. I was almost hit by a car 3 days ago. If that car had struck me and I had lost my life, I would have fallen in that all-cause mortality bucket. So there are all kinds of little things that people don't think about that can confound the data that are very, very important. Real quick, sorry to interrupt. If you're still here, I really appreciate you. If you've gotten any value from this video, please consider hitting the subscribe button and hitting the notification bell so that you get notified every time I release a new video. I release a full podcast every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. And also throughout the week, I'm releasing segment videos that could be anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes long, just providing my commentary on segments that interested me that week. But hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and that's it for me. Back to the video. So I just want to throw another study into the mix that is going to sort of fly in the face of the study that the WTOP news article was talking about. This one is entitled, Metabolically Healthy Obesity is a Misnomer. Components of the metabolic syndrome linearly increase with BMI as a function of age and gender. So what is metabolic syndrome? Metabolic syndrome is it's an umbrella term that includes all kinds of different things, but most notably hypertension, which is like high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, increased triglycerides, things of that nature. And so what they were aiming to look at was there a relationship between body mass index and metabolic syndrome components? And in fact, there was, in a linear fashion. They analyzed 14,000 healthy subjects with a BMI of greater than or equal to 18.5. By the way, I think they should look at people that are below that as well, even though I'm pretty sure it's pretty well accepted at this point that you can be unhealthily thin as well. Having too low of a BMI is not good. But anyways, for this topic, we're talking about 18.5 or higher. And what they found was that at a BMI of 18.5, the lower end of the normal weight, 16% of the people already had at least one metabolic syndrome component. So that's a pretty big deal in and of itself. I think that just speaks to just how unhealthy we are in the first place, that 16% of people already had one metabolic syndrome component at a normal weight. But as BMI increased, the number of metabolic syndrome components increased linearly, meaning more weight equals more metabolic health issues. Now, the most common of that was hypertension, and it was in men. And that's no surprise, but non-obese subjects, so even among those who weren't obese and had no metabolic syndrome components, there was a gradual worsening of metabolic markers as BMI increased. Blood pressure, glucose, triglycerides, all increased. HDL cholesterol, which is like the good cholesterol. Ideally, you want to see LDL come down and HDL go up. HDL was decreased. Now, in obese subjects, only 7.5% were metabolically healthy. This dropped to less than 1% for those with a BMI of greater than 36. Wow. So 1% of them were metabolically healthy at a higher BMI. I think seeing this sort of linear relationship between metabolic syndrome and BMI is very important, because it is metabolic syndrome that is going to lead to things like cardiovascular disease, which we already spoke about in that other study, or cancer, or, all of these different things that aren't all-cause mortality. All-cause mortality, again, is car accidents, knife wounds, all kinds of different things, flu, COVID. And so it's important to, one, what are the mechanisms there that are leading to some of these outcomes? And then two, specify the outcomes. Like, you have to do that. So that's just something to add a little bit more context to the situation. And there are a lot of studies out there. At this point, it's like, I don't understand how people can try and defend being overweight or being obese, because it's sort of an indefensible position. I've talked about this before, but back to COVID, at its peak, the Delta wave, 78% of people in the hospital with severe disease were overweight. So, and usually the people that are complaining about, the people that are in the camp of healthy at any size or fat acceptance and all that stuff, those are usually the same people that are in favor of vaccine mandates, mRNA vaccine mandates and all that stuff. And so it doesn't make any sense to me that through one side of their mouth, they can say that you can be healthy at any size, and then through the other side of their mouth, they don't think they need to lose weight to reduce their risk of severe disease from COVID. Maybe they don't know. I don't know. But either way, it's not a good position to hold, and we should not be encouraging anyone to be overweight, no matter what. It's not a good thing. And you might get away with it, but there's a saying, do what's optimal, not what you can get away with. And you're going to hear me say that over and over and over again throughout this podcast. So anyways, next up, I want to talk about AI fitness trends. So I've had a couple people now ask me what I thought about, there's a bunch of different apps that use AI to program out different workouts and stuff for people. Look, overall, I think artificial intelligence, even though it shouldn't even be classified that, I think AI is great. I use AI every single day. I use it, for video editing. I use it for creating music, the music that you hear in my podcast. I used AI to make that. I use it for graphic design, all of my thumbnails and stuff. I'm constantly using it. I use it as a research assistant to ask different questions, clarifying questions for various studies and all kinds of stuff. So I'm a big fan of AI, and I think it's a really useful tool. That being said, I think AI is more useful for the nutrition and health aspect of things, and not so much the fitness aspect of things. In terms of fitness, I think it's very useful for telling you how many reps and how many, sets and stuff that you should be using. But what people really, really need is a personalized program done by someone that has already had eyes on that person. So what I mean by that is, let's say you find a YouTube video that has, best 10-minute beginner kettlebell workout. One of my friends actually just sent me one. And you watch it and you're like, this doesn't really look like a beginner workout. I don't know if I can do this. And you're like, whatever, I'm going to try it. And you end up hurting yourself. That is what I mean by the individualized aspect of it. You're not going to get that from AI, because an AI has no idea how you move. What is your health history? I mean, how does it plug in your fitness history in terms of like different injuries, broken bones, strained joints? How are those things affecting how you're moving? Because you might be fully healed. It might not affect you at all. Or it, like that right knee thing, might still be affecting you. So maybe it's limiting the amount of knee flexion that you can produce on the right side. There are any number of different things that need to be addressed, where if you don't have someone put eyes on you, then you're never going to figure those things out. And so you'll just find a video, or the AI will give you an exercise program that it deems the best exercise program out there. You go to do it and you end up injuring yourself. So things like nutrition, for the most part, those can be like really easily measured objective measures, where it's like, okay, this is your height, this is your weight, you're male or female, this is your age. Okay, these are the amount of calories that you're supposed to have. Based off of how active you are, we'll use a multiplier to dictate, how many calories you're supposed to have, how many grams of protein. What type of activity are you doing? Okay, how many grams of carbs for that activity? So AI can be really good at that type of thing. For a health coach assistant, typing in your symptoms, giving you a list, like asking you more follow-up questions, going over your health history essentially, and then giving you good ideas. AI is going to be really good for that. Fitness, how many reps in set? You did this weight last week for 12 reps. What should be your progression over the next 12 weeks or whatever? Write me out a powerlifting program for a bench press progression. Okay. AI is going to be really good for that. But in terms of how you actually move as an individual, how you express yourself, here's a good example of this. Alex, one of my clients and a dear friend, he said he had heard on a video, I think it was a video, that the perfect hand width for bench press is to measure your collarbone and multiply that by 2. And so that's kind of what I mean, where there's an AI would try to use objective measures like that just aren't going to work. So first and foremost, your hand width should be predicated on what is comfortable and where do you feel the strongest. If you feel really weak and uncomfortable in a certain hand width, then the chance of you injuring yourself with that hand width during bench press is astronomically higher than if you had felt a little bit more comfortable. Kind of like there are people that have shallow hip sockets and there are people that have deep hip sockets. So the person that has a deep hip socket, their range of motion is going to feel limited. And for them to push past a certain point isn't going to feel comfortable. It's going to feel like they're hitting up against a wall. And the person that has really shallow hip sockets, their ball and socket joint is free to move around that socket. So a lot of different positions are going to feel comfortable to them. And so it's very similar with bench press. There might be a certain angle with your arm that does not feel good to you. And it's not good for you to force yourself into that angle just because someone on the internet told you that was the perfect angle you were supposed to be at. So first and foremost, you should feel comfortable. You should feel strong. Secondly, the elbow angle matters too. Are you biasing chest activation? Or are you biasing tricep activation? Having your hands a little bit closer in and increasing elbow flexion on the way down is going to bias more tricep activation, right? Having your hands a little bit wider is going to bias less. You have less flexion in the elbow. That's going to bias more activation in the chest, which is good. That's why most people are doing a bench press in the first place. And so for me, when I'm just thinking about bench press for people and myself, and push-ups, by the way, and overhead press, the first point that I start off with is keeping my elbow underneath of my wrist. And that's going to use a little bit of my tricep. It's going to use a little bit of my chest. But the most efficient line is a straight line. If my forearms are crooked, then I'm leaking energy somewhere. It's not the most efficient. But once I ask the question, okay, now that I have vertical forearms and I have my elbow underneath my wrist, the next question is, okay, what muscle am I trying to hit? Okay, if it's my triceps, let's scooch in a little bit. More elbow flexion, more tricep activation. If it's my chest, I'll do the opposite, or I might just leave my hands where they were based off of what I'm feeling in my chest. But the idea there, though, is that AI is not going to get that. An AI would try to have an objective measure for everyone, and I think a lot of people would get injured along the way, just like they do from YouTube videos, where it's like this best workout video, this thing, best diet for this, best diet for that. And without knowing the individual's health history and how they react to certain foods and teaching them how to do things like food journal, like there are tremendous risks there. So again, I am a big advocate of AI. I use it a lot. And I think everyone would do well to use AI more. Otherwise you will get left behind, but I don't think it's going to be the end all be all for personal actually lifting coaching. I think people need to hire a coach, get someone to get eyeballs on them, watch a tremendous amount of YouTube videos on proper form. If you're trying to get better at squatting, watch 1,000 squat videos. I can't tell you how many squat and deadlift and bench press videos I've watched over the past 12 years. It's a lot. And an AI will never be able to give me what I got from those videos, but then have someone assess your mobility, assess your stability, mobility of your thoracic spine, shoulder mobility, all those different things. And then from there, you can start to get into a personalized program on what's best for you. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is gym etiquette. Now, I don't go to the gym very often anymore. I work out in my office now. I'm an at-home coach. I teach people how to train with kettlebells at home. So I'm a big fan of kettlebells, but I still do go to the gym every now and then. And it's without fail, each time I go to the gym, I see something that bothers the heck out of me, just poor gym etiquette. And so the last thing I saw, I was doing a little bit of cardio, and there was a machine there was a cable cross machine that a guy was on. And first of all, I couldn't even tell you what exercise he was doing because I don't even think he knew what exercise he was doing, but he was slamming the weights over and over and over and over again. Now, what that means is that he was dropping the weights essentially. And the reason why that's terrible for a cable cross machine is that a cable cross machine is one of those machines that has like a pivoting origin, and it usually has some sort of handle across, and there's one on each side. So you can have a handle on each side and do flies, chest flies, or any number of different exercises with it. It's a great machine, very expensive machine. But a cable pulley system, the weight, the cable holding the weight is always under tension, no matter what. And so when you drop the weight bounces, and when it bounces back up, the cable is no longer under tension. Now you've created a system of momentum where when the weight starts to descend again, it pulls the cable with exponentially more force than it had on it when the cable was just constantly taut. Okay. So if you imagine the cable's taut, the weight bounces. Once it bounces, the cable is loose. And then when the weight starts to drop again, it snaps the cable back into tension much harder than it would have if it had just stayed under tension. And so, I see him doing this and I'm just like, oh boy, it really just bothers me. But long story short, I go in the next week and that machine was out of commission. So this guy with his ego and just stupidity, really, there's a lot of people paying a lot of money to go to that gym, and that piece of equipment is very popular. Cable cross machines are almost always taken up. People are always using them. They're fantastic pieces of equipment to hit all kinds of different exercises from all kinds of different angles. And you took one of them out of the mix because you just didn't respect the facility enough to just learn proper gym etiquette. So if you are one of those people that slams weights, so let me throw two caveats in there. It's okay to slam the weight if you are practicing Olympic weightlifting and using bumper plates. So bumper plates are designed to be dropped. If you ever see someone doing cleans, Olympic snatches, power cleans, all that stuff, where they're jerking the weight up into either the overhead position or the front rack position, and they're colorful plates, yellow, green, whatever, those plates are designed to bounce. Those plates are designed to be dropped. Now, the other caveat to that is if someone's deadlifting really, really heavy. So if you see a powerlifter and you see someone deadlifting, 400 pounds, 500 pounds, whatever, for powerlifters, the eccentric, the way down, is not that important. They're not trying to stay under tension like, say, a bodybuilder would, where a bodybuilder is trying to keep their muscle under tension all the way down and hopefully in the stretched position have a lot of tension there as well. That doesn't matter to a powerlifter. If they're just trying to lift as much weight as heavy as possible, then for them, they're actually wasting energy. They still want to control it a little bit to hopefully not break the flipping floor, but they're wasting energy the slower they try to descend with the weight. It's just not a good idea for them. And those are the two cases that I would kind of excuse it: Olympic weightlifters and heavy powerlifters that are like deadlifting or something. But if you're not one of those, do not slam any weights, even the dumbbells. You don't understand, the dumbbells will start to become unscrewed. And that is a really big deal too. And that could be a safety issue where someone's doing bench press. They don't know that one of the heads of the dumbbell has become unscrewed. And now one of the heads drops on their face when they're doing bench press. So I don't care how strong you are. I don't care what you're doing. Unless you're doing those two things, Olympic weightlifting and deadlifting heavy, then do not slam the weights. But that is it for me. I'm done ranting. I'm sorry. I had to get that one off of my chest because I see too much of that. I don't go to the gym very often, but it never fails that every time I go, there's some dipshit just doing some crazy stuff, slamming the weights, and it's just not good. You're going to ruin it for everyone, man. But anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. A little heady with the studies and stuff, I know. But hey, if you enjoyed that, let me know. If it was a little too much for you, let me know that too. I'm open to feedback and I'm looking to improve as usual. But if you like the podcast, please like the podcast and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. And if you know anyone that you think would benefit from hearing it, or would just enjoy it in general, then please share it along. But my name is Randall James. This is the Always Adaptive podcast. And please follow me at Always Adaptive on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Threads, X, all that jazz. And I'm happy to engage. So if you have any extra questions outside of that, please holler at me. But I will see you at the next one. Peace. If you're still here at the end of the video, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for sticking around. I just wanted to tell you about one quick thing that I'm offering to help people jumpstart their year going into 2025. So I had a friend approach me and ask me if I had any sort of like one-off starter programs for people to just pay one time and just kind of kickstart them. And so I came up with something for him, and I thought to myself, why don't I offer this to everyone? And so I came up with this package, and what it comes with is one 90-minute session. It comes with a movement assessment and warm-up guidance to basically see what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what sort of exercises should you be including in your warm-up for injury prevention. And then it also comes with an exercise program audit if you are experienced. So that's you giving me your program. I take a look at it based off of your goals. I kind of dissect it and make sure that it's heading in the right direction, make sure that it's as efficient as possible. If you're a complete newbie, then you get your own program based off of what you have access to, weights in your room, your home gym, or the actual gym, whatever it is. I'm more than experienced with all different types of environments. And then also it comes with a diet audit. So we go through your nutrition program if you are following a diet, and you can get a meal plan. We could talk about that, but typically what I like to do is give actionable nutrition tips that are gonna, something that's a little bit easier to follow. So for example, we might talk about hand portions for their meals. So, you know, a piece of protein the size of your fist, 1 to 2 cups palms of carbohydrate, and then an open hand for vegetables. So that's the program. It also comes with 2 check-ins throughout the month. Those are about 15 to 20 minutes. And of course, it's not that rigid, but the whole package comes out to $170. And I've done the math on this. This is a lot of value. And this is probably one of the best ways to kickstart. And I would really recommend you jump on this fast, because what you want to do is start before January 1st, get some momentum, and then get another surge of momentum going into the new year. So go ahead and email me if you're interested at randall@alwaysadaptive.com, or you can visit my website, and there's a button all over the place where you can schedule a free session, and I can get to meet you, and we can go over options and talk about what's next. So thanks again for sticking around for this video. I really appreciate it, and I will see you at the next one.